Hello and welcome to the Poor Hammer Podcast, episode 69. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And this episode is nice.
That's true. We've got a special guest.
Yeah. So this is the book club for The Infinite and Divine. This is the patron-decided episode for the season. This is one that we've been looking forward to and warning you about multiple times now, unless this is your first time ever hearing of us, in which case, welcome. But this is my third time reading the book. Eric, this is your second time reading it.
Yep.
So we really didn't have a new perspective on it, so we solved that problem. So I'd like to introduce everyone to my wife. Say hello, Jen.
Hello.
Aw, you missed out on the hello, Jen.
I almost did it.
I was like, man, that's the perfect time to do it. Go for it.
So my wife, Jenny, is joining us. She has just listened to it for the first time, and we now have a perspective of basically every angle to cover this book from. So without any further ado, let's jump into this.
Sounds good.
So before we start off into the main discussion here, we are going to, from this point on, assume you have either read The Infinite and the Divine, or you do not care about spoilers. If that is not the case, leave us YouTube pleasantries if you're on YouTube, and then get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I think I would definitely recommend this book if you're interested at all. So if you're worried about spoilers, go read, listen, whatever, come back and...
Yeah, I think all three of us would recommend the book, so there you go. All right, with that out of the way, I guess a little background for people who are new to the show. Jenny, you've got passing 40k lore knowledge, being related to people who are way too into it.
Yes, that's correct.
And you're a first-time reader, and this is your first 40k book, right?
The full 40k book, yes.
And then, Eric, this is the first one you read, but now you've had more experience reading them, but...
Yeah, I've got only a few extras, but yeah, this was the initial jumping point into it.
And then there's me. I've read, I don't even know, it's in the 30s at this point, 40k novels.
And all the wikis. Basically, you're the problem, I'm the normal person, and Jenny's the new person. Got it.
I know more about 40k lore than you should be comfortable admitting in public. So, we've got every angle covered on this book. I also have 208 notes that I took during this reading. I recommend not taking notes on a book that you like, because it makes it a chore to reread.
I took a few notes as well, because it was like, I want to remember this quote, because it stuck out the first time, and I need to make sure that I actually have it in mind. But it definitely brought back memories to high school and school of like, I've got a deadline, I'm doing a presentation in front of the class on this book that I read. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah, I would recommend not taking notes while you read a book. It's a negative experience, but we make sacrifices for all of you. All right, let's start things off. So Jen, it's your first time reading this book. What is your impressions and overall thoughts?
Of the book, I enjoyed this book. I wasn't intending to listen to it, but it ended up happening that way. And the longer it went, the more I was kind of like, okay, well, now I guess I have to know how this ends. And I really enjoyed it. The two main characters are super dorks.
Of the two, which one's your favorite?
Trazyn.
It's pretty difficult to not pick Trazyn in that one. He just has a lot of the funniest shit.
I've heard people who are fans of Orikan more, but I think it's going to be a minority opinion. He has shining moments in this book. On rereads, I appreciate him more. The
first read, Trazyn was like, wow, Orikan's kind of lame. The only reason I have any interest in that is because playing off Trazyn. But the second read, I've actually enjoyed Orikan a lot more. It just works better, honestly, on the second read through of like, oh, I understand now.
I think Orikan comes off more antagonistic the first time through the book. And then your second or third read, you notice both of them have flawed perspectives on everything.
Yeah.
And you see the duality of where each one is wrong throughout the book, and they're both in the wrong for the majority of the book.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Orikan I think is just harder to like because he's a more selfish and shitty person from a normal person's perspective. But you end up enjoying him more when you understand his character better.
I don't even know if it's that he's more like Trazyn's a selfish person.
Sure, selfish was the wrong word.
But he doesn't look at things with emotional lens quite as much. It's more of the end, not the journey or reflection kind of thing. And that means that like there's less of the emotional connection kind of thing doesn't quite hit as much until on the second read through you start seeing like glimmers here and there of like, oh, that's the emotional part of Orikan right there. It's just muted compared to what Trazyn is doing.
Yes, he definitely has the harder issues when it comes to lack of tact, having issues in social interactions sometimes because he lets his emotions get the better of him, where Trazyn is just the suave.
I don't know about suave, but in comparison.
Yeah.
I think that shows a lot in the Necron court scene.
Yes.
So, question, Jenny, what were your thoughts on taking a step back from this is a Warhammer 40K book? What are your thoughts of just like, is this book enjoyable? Like, was it a well-written book? Kind of, like.
And what would you say the genre is of the book?
So I feel like it is a good book. If you control replaced all of the Warhammer terms with other terms, it would still be a good book. It does have like the Warhammer overlaid on it, but you could replace things with, instead of Doom Scythe, you replace it with Airplane and it would still be a good book. It's almost kind of like a buddy cop film.
Yeah.
Sure, like what genre it would be, because with all the Warhammer overlaid on it, it does become like, really sci-fi.
But there is like this like comedy.
Yeah, it almost ends up being like a buddy cop comedy, like these two people absolutely hate each other, but now we have to work together, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah, for me, I had it listed as an adventure book.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a buddy cop thing. That is the main dynamic for the characters, but like it doesn't play out as an action book. It's not really a mystery or anything. To me, it's like flat out like a fantasy adventure, but it's set in the 40K setting.
Yeah, like there isn't a whole lot of action until like the very, very end. And even that is, we had to do something to end this, so now we're going to have an action scene to end this. It's not really like the whole time
There's a few action scenes, but they're not actual action scenes so much as a storytelling tool.
Yeah.
Because, it's like the book starts out and it's an action scene.
Yeah, it's a straight up Indiana Jones scene.
Yeah, he's running through and fighting, and there's dinosaurs.
There's a riddle door he has to open. There's foreshadowing for later in the book or story. It is an Indiana Jones opener.
And that's the kind of thing that, like, continually shows up for the action scenes of, like, oh, okay, the action, it's there, and we're getting some explanation of, like, what's happening, and, like, oh, there's some call-outs to the 40K, but, like, this scene isn't about the action, it's about progressing a story, progressing a narrative.
Which is where I get to adventure as the genre instead of action.
I can see that.
The book isn't about the action, it's about an adventure, and action occurs on adventures, so there's always some action in an adventure.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense of these two characters are in conflict trying to get an item to a place at a time.
The MacGuffin.
So that is the adventure. But I don't know, man, like for me, it felt more comedy. Everything about it just hit spy versus spy over and over and over again. And I loved every part of it.
It is a book that definitely enjoys the comedic aspects of 40K. Orc books, in my opinion, often do the same. They understand that the setting is not all serious grimdarkness. A common thing I saw as a complaint for people who give a negative review of this book, it tends to be people who don't get it and say, I don't like this, it's not grimdark, this isn't 40K. From the angle of a Necron...
Yeah.
Necrons are the grimdark. Trazyn plays a practical joke and a planet dies.
One of the things that kept popping up, and like this was a thing that I noticed originally, but like on the second read, I just kept thinking like, holy fucking shit, Necrons are scary. They're like legitimately terrifying.
Yeah, and it's often like unintended consequences. Like they don't even think about it. I didn't even catch this on the first read, really. I just was kind of like listening to it and didn't really think about like the implication. But when they're revisiting the Awakened Council for the second time. And the Awakened Council is like suspicious that Orikan changed the timeline during the court hearing thing, right?
Yeah.
They mentioned how after the hearing, time was so screwed up because he had rewound the time like 3 times or whatever, that reality was weakened there and a giant warp incursion occurred in the Sautek homeworld.
Right.
And like they had to fight off demons and lost like a ton of Necrons due to that.
Yeah, and there's like a list of like, here's how many.
And it's like such a great, like, Orikan doesn't even think about it when he's just spam using rewinding time and stuff for his own amusement. And it's like making the universe weaker at defending itself wherever he is.
I think that is one of the themes throughout the book that kept popping up of like these 2 undying immortal robots are doing so much on a galactic scale. Planets die, civilizations are ruined, and they don't really intend any of the things. It just is a consequence of an action that they did without caring for the consequence.
Yeah, and there's like all through the book you get this. Like Orikan correctly predicts the end of a tomb world and just lets it happen because he wants to steal from it. Trazyn finds out about the prediction and also does nothing because he just wants to steal from it, and they just let a planet die of their own faction because they're both pricks.
Yep.
It's horrible things happening, but the characters don't care.
Yeah.
Because they are above needing to care about these things. And this is why I also love the demon sections in the Dark Imperium trilogy. It's horribly grimdark because they're having fun goofing around and causing mass murder.
Yeah, and at one point there are destroyers that are unleashed. And it talks about like, oh, they're going to literally remove all life. Not a civilization, not a people, no life at all. And just continue to unceasingly work towards that goal. And it's like, fucking hell, man.
They have like logic behind it. They're not just like, oh, let's just let them loose and they're just gonna go to, like, they have a plan. They have a system for this. It's not just, oh, we'll just go burn everything. No, they have steps to take.
Yeah, one of them was Trazyn found one of the like remaining ones or whatever, and he was like heading towards the ice caps or whatever to like melt them so that it was.
It's like we're gonna go melt the ice so that the increase of fresh water into the sea will screw up the oceans and just destroy all of the ocean life.
And this is gonna increase the time frame for total annihilation of life from 6 millennia to 2. And these are like your destroyers have this like. Oh, they're just thinking on different time frames.
And we can get into time. I think that is the major discussion of this book. The time themes throughout this book are amazing. The playing with the perspective of what a time frame is and like how long it takes to do anything and how long a plan takes to enact.
Yeah.
Seeing something from an immortal perspective and actually understanding that immortals don't care how long something takes unless external pressure is put upon them.
There are definitely some like absolutely hilarious time frames involved in this book. I was talking with Brad after we finished one of the chapters, and Orikan is like, oh, if you can catch me, and then he goes and sits in his house for like 2,000 years.
300 years. I have that note written.
And I'm like,
forgot about that.
You're not making it really hard to find you here, my man, but okay. I mean, the difference is that, like, a lot of books are written from the perspective of, like, mortal races. So, like,
right.
You can't spend 400 years debating about who to wake up. Your characters won't live that long. It doesn't make sense. So it is hilarious that they spend, like, the entire human lifespan arguing about which person should wake up to make a decision. They just don't care. They just have all this time. The only thing they care about is, like, oh, well, in several centuries, the rest of us are going to wake up, and we should probably do something about that. But until that time, whatever.
Yeah, they spent 2 years just debating who to wake up. And that's like one conversation is 2 years long. And later on, Orikan and Trazyn are arguing about something, and they have an awkward silence that's an hour. Someone says something, and then an awkward silence that's 2 hours while they just stare at each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, to them, that's like, it doesn't matter if it was 2 hours or 2 seconds of awkward silence. There's a whole bunch of like really fun, like long-term plans. I guess the time thing goes both ways too, because if we want to get into chronosense.
Oh, yeah.
which is the extra sense that allows you to like slow your perception of time.
Yeah, you go into like flash speed.
Yeah, you don't get faster, but you experience time slower.
Right. And since you're basically a robot, you get to think as fast as you can.
But you get things like a complaint about something taking 2 microseconds, which is considered slow for how fast it triggered.
Right.
Trazyn plotting an arc 200 times before carelessly tossing something to make it look cool.
Oh yeah, that's when he has the
Mysterios.
Yeah, I was like, it's such a name of
the Astrarium Mysterios.
Yeah, wow. Let's make it very obvious. This is just a
This
MacGuffin.
is a MacGuffin. Yeah.
But yeah, he just like, he has it and he's basically successfully taken it. It's like, oh, I'll just toss it into my warp backpack.
Dimensional pocket.
Yes, Dimensional pocket gets said a lot.
Which I can no longer take seriously.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of those types of things that come up, like the death mask.
Replace all face with death mask. Yeah, you can only do so much when you have to change anatomy. I think this is better handled, honestly, than Twice Dead King. Nodes is far more obnoxious in Twice Dead King than death mask is in The Infinite and Divine. Whenever you talk about an alien race, you get into like weird, you're going to overuse one way of saying something because you want your audience to be able to follow it.
Yeah, and it is good to like reference back to like, these aren't human.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say his face because he doesn't have a face. When you say face, you think of your face. It's not a flesh face, so it doesn't make sense to call it that.
There's a whole thing in both The Infinite and Divine and in Twice Dead King about the damage of biotransference on the mind.
Yes.
And part of it is they truly see it as their death masks. They are dead. This is like a death mask for a pharaoh that is placed over your face. They do not believe their metal faces are their faces. This is a replacement of their face.
That's a question that I had right at the beginning. Trazyn does his, oh, I'm dead, I'm going to hop into somebody else so I'm not dead thing. And as he does it, the living metal warps into his shape.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's not like what he was as a Necrontyr because he doesn't remember what he was as a Necrontyr. So that was always just a weird thing to me. Like, he always is Trazyn and he warps to look like Trazyn. But what Trazyn looks like as a Necron isn't what he looked like as a Necrontyr.
Yes, their physical forms as Necrons seem to be based off of their subconscious. Trazyn has his cane, he's hunched over with his hood, right?
Yeah.
Because he was a hunchback who had a cane and everything in his former life. And he doesn't really remember that life other than like little tiny fragments of things, but it still sculpts who he is as a Necron. Twice Dead King gets into why that is and like why only important people have their brains. But yeah, it seems to be like your body is based off of your mind.
Okay. One of the nice things about Infinite and the Divine is that Robert Rath was actually able to show enough that you could glimpse understanding without going too in depth to make it boring, and at the same time not just being like name drop, name drop, name drop. I'm sure you understand all of this because you've read 18 books previous.
Exactly. And that's why I think if you are interested in Necrons in general, like you read this book and you want more, this followed by Twice Dead King is a really good way to go because Twice Dead King is much more focused on the psychological impact of biotransference and the damage people have. One of my favorite early lines in this with the hypocrisy of Trazyn is when he is talking about his cryptek. And he says, everyone had their damage, not he though. Trazyn had returned with his entire faculties intact.
Yeah, and then his cryptek Sanit was like, my lord? Trazyn was like, what? You want me to repeat that? Oh, yeah, sure.
A couple scenes later with, he's visiting one of his other crypteks and he's like, I've been asking about expanding the galleries, but I would have to expand into the wine cellars, so I need your approval. And Trazyn's like, no, of course not. He's like, but Lord, you do not drink wine. Of course I don't. It's far too valuable.
Yeah.
Which is great as a joke. And is hilarious because it's like he doesn't get that his servant is saying, my lord, you're dead. You literally cannot drink wine. Why are we keeping this shit?
Right, exactly.
Like, it's part of his obsession of he must store valuable objects. He is essentially like a bird picking up shiny objects and keeping them in his nest.
He's a compulsive hoarder.
Yes, which Trazyn does point out in this, which I really like. He points out in this, to be an immortal, you must have obsessions.
Right.
If you do not have an obsession, you will go mad. Something must keep you busy at all times. You cannot be left alone with your thoughts in eternity.
And, I mean, that does make some amount of sense.
And it's honestly something that you see throughout the book of every one of the Necrons seems to have their own obsessions, whether it be, trying to reconquer the galaxy or trying to get back their flesh, having some weird fetish for something. They all seem broken in their own unique ways.
And there was a slight example of the if you're stuck with yourself kind of thing, you go crazy with
High metallurgist Quelka.
Yeah, when he's stuck down there and like goes insane, and it's like, yeah, part of it is the numbers repeating or whatever, but I feel like part of it is also just that became the obsession.
He already had the flare virus at that point.
Yeah.
Which it's something that's pointed out in this book, and it's something on my first read, I read The Infinite Divine, and then I read Twice Dead King, and I went, that's weird. They both have different reasons for flare virus and how it works. But in later reads of Twice Dead King, I take that back because I think I misunderstood the first time how they thought flare virus was occurring. The numbers have nothing to do with it. Flare virus later on, he says, must already be in the subject. The deceiver can't put it into you. He can only trigger it if it's latent.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas that works better lore-wise with how it works in Twice Dead King, which is a whole different thing.
And the flare virus and the destroyer weren't spelled out, but there's enough like, oh, I kind of understand what's happening because there's enough examples of it happening.
Yeah, and that's something where I know I've watched an interview with Robert Rath talking about this. He and Nate Crawley, who did Twice Dead King, were basically given their assignment to make a Necron book at essentially the same time.
Okay.
Neither of them really were in communication. They just made their own Necron books and released them and then got to read each other's book. There's differences between the two that make technology not line up right, stuff like that. There is excusable difference where like Twice Dead King is about a dynasty that is like a nobody faction. So you're seeing very different viewpoints between the two, but they also had different ways on how destroyers work, how the flare virus works, because a lot of it is just there wasn't lore written out past like 2 sentences for these things before these books, because Necron lore was literally a couple short stories.
It's kind of wild. Reading The Infinite and the Divine, I haven't read Twice Dead King, but it feels like it's fleshed out of like, oh, there's actually a lot of politicking going on behind the scenes, and like, oh, there's a lot of hints to larger pictures.
Yeah, and I think Robert Rath did an amazing job of filling out this part of the universe.
So back to the Necron court being prime examples of a lot of that stuff. It wasn't just the politics in the background happening. There was also a few splashes of just like, I forget what it was called. It was Gone Like the Kuvu.
Yes, Gone Like the Kuvu. I have that one written too.
And it was just like, what the hell is that something I'm supposed to know? And maybe it's in something else. I don't know.
No, it's a great self-explained.
A necrotier idiom that has existed forever. And hey, that's just part of the culture now. And those little things at least made it feel like Necrons had more to it. I'm actually surprised that there wasn't a large amount of previous works done to pull from.
Yeah. All right, Jen. So it was your first time listening, and it's kind of spoiled on Eric and I at this point. So let's go through from your perspective. I guess give us a breakdown of your thoughts on the plot and the story in total.
Okay, so one thing I did enjoy about this book is that because Necrons are immortal, you get to see this planet kind of change. You get to see all these civilizations build on each other, but they're not even like the same species, so they end up like trying to, like, we're going to put our own name on it and then we can claim that it's ours. And
yeah, Sephiroth becoming Serenade.
Yeah, and you get to watch them where they're like, oh, these must have been built by the Emperor. And it's like, no, these were built by the last people who lived on this planet. But sure, whatever makes you guys happy.
I do enjoy the amount of, there was no life and now there's like single bacteria, and then it evolves into like, oh, there's coral reefs, and throughout the entire thing it's just like, oh, these new life uses the corpses of the old life.
Yes. That's like in that very opening scene of the planet without a name, and then it ends with a horned spacecraft, which is a Doom Scyther equivalent, appearing in the planet having a name. And then, did you understand that that was a Necron spacecraft in that scene, or did you just assume it was Eldari? Because then the next time you're on the planet, in the jump cut, it's Eldar living on the planet.
I can't say that I really...
It's too early in the book, so you haven't formed.
Yeah, I haven't really gotten there, but...
I know that the first time I read it, I didn't know.
Yeah, but I actually appreciate on a reread that you, if you know the book, realize that's a Necron ship, not an Eldar ship. That is the end of that scene. Then you get even further payoff when, after the Exterminatus, Trazyn is going down through the fossil record as he, like, descends into the planet to find the gate. And he, like, sees, oh, here's the Eldar in the fossil record and all this. And then he sees an entire different population and culture before he gets to the Necron one, that just lived and died on this planet, and no one knows they were there. And I like how you get this feeling that the book story is the planet story.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that, just because that's not something you normally see in books, just, you know, again, because you're normally focused more on characters and less on, like, the planet as a whole. So that was cool. I enjoyed that Trazyn is both his own problem and his own solution to just about everything.
Yes, he's really good at solving problems he himself causes.
Yes, but, like, he doesn't realize that he's caused this problem, and then he solves it, and it's like, you wouldn't have had this problem if you didn't do this in the first place, but whatever, you know, whatever, man, it's funny. It works out.
Yeah, definitely. What were your thoughts on the museum aspect?
So, like, personally, I love museums.
Okay.
So I enjoy his sense of, like, we should preserve stuff. I mean, admittedly, he takes it extremely far.
Yeah.
Keeping live people in stasis fields so they go mad, experiencing 15,000 years between, like, conscious moment.
Yes, it's you know, that's a little bit much. But for him, it's like it's his compulsion. But it is fascinating that he is attempting to keep all of these historical moments as a record.
And that obsession kind of like pushes it to be like as accurate as possible oftentimes.
Yeah.
Which is alluded to quite often earlier on. And there's the payoff with the orc.
Oh, God, the rocket.
Yes. Yes. Where he's like, maybe I shouldn't store these things with fuel in them. And it's like... But why did you do that in the first place?
Yeah.
But I mean, I can appreciate that he's basically trying to make living pictures because the things he's keeping are important. It's not like he's just picking up every rock he comes across, but like the fall of a civilization. He's like, we should preserve this because this is an important moment. This is the end of these people.
Yes, and I have a quote I really like where Trazyn's discussing humanity and how the Horus Heresy changed everything for his interest in them because he said they were plentiful and were spreading across the universe, but it didn't matter.
Just the normal empire spreading things, like whatever.
Yeah, because he has a line where he mentions that if all he cared about was something's ability to breed and spread, he'd have nothing in his museum but insects, which I think is a pretty interesting take on it of you need the drama of history, the feeling of impact. You need something to matter in order to have it be worthy of storing.
In general, Trazyn had not been much interested in humans. He collected them, of course. He collected everything. But he considered them on the same level as orcs, or various kinds of carnivorous algae. Their spread across the cosmos had destroyed so many more interesting civilizations. And since the rise of the Emperor, their culture had an utter sameness that bored him. If Trazyn cared about the mere ability to propagate and spread, he'd spend his eternity collecting bacteria. Just because a thing was successful and ubiquitous did not make it fascinating. It just made it common.
Yeah, so the themes going back and forth between these two main characters, like constantly like trying to one up each other and get the MacGuffin. It's always interesting to see the museum aspect just because it's so unique and call outs and stuff like that. And I'm interested to hear what your initial impressions on the Orikan side of like when it's his introspection on when he has the artifact.
Towards the end of the book, I really grow to like Orikan, but that first scene where you meet him is so hard for me to get over because it's like he is willing to destroy all of this stuff. And admittedly, it's not his stuff, but like he destroys all that pottery, which was made by the Necrons back when they were still flesh. And for me, that's like, you might never be flesh again. Like, this was made back when you guys... It's just, like, that's such a... Like, it's such an... Like, for me, it just feels like that's such an important thing, and you're just willing to, like, just wreck it all just 'cause you want a magic box. And it's like, I know that for him, the box is more important, but I can totally understand why Trazyn is so upset, because it's like, you can't replace this. You can't just, oh, we'll just go out and make more. There is no making more. We can't ever do this again because we don't have flesh anymore. Like, yeah, I could probably go make some with my robot hands, but it's not the same thing.
It's like, so this gets into souls in 40K, which is a whole episode.
They could probably make pots, but it won't be like, it's going to be a very systematic pot. It's not going to be art. It's going to be like, I literally made clay into the exact shape of a sphere because I'm a robot now and that's all I can do.
Yeah.
The only downside that seems to occur from losing your soul is you can no longer create art.
And you kind of go insane, but whatever. But it's so like, for me, it's like, I get that he doesn't care about the past. He's only interested in, like, the present and the future.
I mean, he doesn't care about the present either.
That's true.
Orikan is a being of the future. Trazyn is a being of the past.
And neither of them live in the present. Fucking hell.
I disagree with that because I think Orikan makes a good point. At one point, I have his quote, "You've developed a fetishistic attachment to the present," when he's talking to Trazyn. He's basically telling Trazyn, like, you keep falling in love with all of these current societies that you hang out in. Like, he's hanging out watching humans, and he's worried about upsetting their culture while they're doing their investigation and stuff. And Orikan's like, it doesn't matter. The present isn't important, only the future is. Whereas, like, Trazyn finds it disgusting to, like, end a society that is, like, currently successful, like, to ruin something that is currently alive.
I definitely understand where you're coming from on that. It seems to me that Trazyn's more interested on learning how to document the past correctly, as perfectly as possible. And that requires, if you're able to live through it, you can do a better job kind of thing. And part of that is because, like, he has so many dead civilizations that, like, probably could have saved a bunch of them, but didn't.
Yes, he is more interested in the experience of the now than altering it.
Yeah.
Trazyn will not save a society that is currently collapsing. He's there to witness and document the collapse. But he would not cause a collapse of something that is currently existing because he wants to document it for some other reason at the time.
So one of the things that I found on the reread is that, like, they both want to see art, but they have such vastly different ideas. Like, Trazyn's art is the present, the, you know, poetry, the theater, whereas Orikan's art is, like, mathematical equations and puzzles in the mindscape and that kind of stuff. Even though it's not, like, he doesn't portray it as art. It's just science. It's just the future. It just is. But, like, the way that he explains and talks about it is like somebody talking about this piece of art. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of those things that it's difficult to pin down Orikan's heart on the initial read-through. At least it was for me. Because the Trazyn side is an experience that most of us humans can at least sort of relate to. It's a museum. I can understand a museum curator. But the Orikan side of, like, he's going to spend 300 years going over this equation over and over and over and over again in different permutations. And it's like, that doesn't make sense.
I think it's hysterical that they keep trying to, like, rob each other back and forth to the point where their government basically steps in and says, stop. You have to stop. Because they're just getting so out of hand with their attempts to steal this box back from each other. I do love that Trazyn kind of reaches this point where he's like, stop messing with all of my stuff, and attempts to just murder Orikan in an alleyway.
I love that scene so much. It's so good. The payoff of the, I don't have the Mysterios, you can keep it, after he just blows his fucking brains out.
Very much, I'm just gonna break your legs because you've pissed me off.
Orikan reached inside himself, finding the wet warmth of his reactor leak. The glowing jade fluid coated his hand, and he used it to paint a sigil on his forehead crest. And he made an ancient oath, one from a long-ago home world where his kind had been flesh, not metal. Back in those centuries, the oath would have been taken with blood, but now he took it with a substance more deadly and enduring. "I swear," he said, his vocal actuators grinding, "by the killing sun, by the stars and dust, by my ancestors and the progeny, I swear to harness these powers and open the tomb of Nepareth." The sky was growing dark. He could see the stars. "But first," said Orikan, "I swear to destroy Trazyn the Infinite."
I do enjoy that because the Necrons are not so much indestructible, but like replaceable. Like you can get away with a lot more of like the amount of times these main characters die is very high. So they like just severely injure each other and then like they just move on with their lives. It does add to the sense of comedy because you can get away with Trazyn just blowing Orikan apart and being like, keep it. I am disappointed we didn't get Trazyn finger guns. I was really hoping he was just going to do finger guns and leave, but it did end up being hysterical either way, so.
Yes, with the present.
Yes. Good guess, spring presents, and he just unleashes these horrifying scarabs. Okay, bye!
The monsters from the Katachan jungle or whatever. It's an interesting one. Did you feel like you were like getting a list of things that are like hey, you know this, when they were doing either call outs in armies Trazyn would summon or things within his museum? Or did you feel like they were fleshed out as like a item within the story where it doesn't feel like it's just there to go, hey, look, it's that thing you know from other lore?
So, you guys know, my 40K lore is basically kind of like what I have been exposed to more in passing. I happen to be around a lot of people who talk about 40K.
What a gentle way of saying that Brad doesn't shut up.
My brother is also to blame.
I can't say that I talk a lot about 40K, but like I'm around people who talk a lot about it, so I hear it. I do feel like the things that Trazyn summons have, because they get like their own story section written from their point of view, you do get a feel for like these aren't just here because like, hey, remember that these things exist? They are more like, hey, Trazyn summoned these for a reason. But also like I am aware that these are things that exist within the 40K universe. But I don't feel like they're flat. I feel like they're summoned more organically. They make sense within the story. And half the time they're things that he's like encountered in the story and he takes them and then they show up later.
What were your thoughts on like the Chekhov gun type thing of all of the things that he's just like seeing and collecting and then payoffs later type stuff?
Is there more than one of that?
He takes the Eldari riders. He takes the big orc.
Yeah, I was like, he takes actually a lot of things and not all of them are used in like the final battle.
Okay, yeah, I guess I merged two events in my brain, so there are at least 3 distinct events that he takes from.
I mean, like, when you're first listening to it and Trazyn is like, I'm gonna take that, it's always hysterical because he's always got other things to be doing, but he's like, nope, we're gonna stop and we're gonna take that home with us because that's just how Trazyn is.
With the Gargant.
Yeah, like, he's like, no, we're taking that. Don't blow that up because I'm putting that in my house.
He allows hundreds of more Necrons to die, specifically because he wants to collect the undamaged Gargant.
You know, they're unfortunately robots. They didn't wake up well. They're not really sentient.
Which actually is an interesting thing on Necron culture.
They were on the surface, so they're all going to get reanimated.
True.
It's not like they were in the caves. When they're in the caves, it's a little bit different because now you're just wasting it. But like when you're on the surface, technically they were okay to be reanimated. Somebody's got to pick up all the parts to put them back together. But I can't blame him for going around being like, I want that and I'm going to take it with me. But then at the end, when it all kind of shows up again, you're like, hey, that's cool that you brought that back.
So there were a few times that there were callouts of like, I think it was Istvan 5 or something like that.
Yeah, Istvan 5 gets called out. Just things in his museum are like, he has a Krork. He has the Hrud exhibit, which is like a famous 30K enemy. He has people from Istvan 5, which is a famous event in the Horus Heresy, is the whole Istvan Wars.
And I think that even on the second time, like the first time reading a bunch of those, I was just like, yeah, okay, thing. And there's enough surrounding that you can kind of intuit what actually you're supposed to get out of it. Like, oh, that's, the Krork. That's a big, like, orky thing. Smash. Scary. Cool. Got it. I feel like there are quite a few that, like, even on the second read through, I'm like, I don't know this, but I clearly know that it's a thing. Like, Istvan 5, I don't actually know anything about it other than, like, it's not this book's thing. It exists, and it's a important part somewhere else.
To me, the Istvan 5 one is a freebie because Istvan is like a static point in Horus Heresy you can point to with a date, and it lets you date the events of this book around it. And you're allowed one of those, where you have a way within the story of the book to say, hey, this is after this event, so now you know when this book is taking place.
Right.
And the several thousand millennia after that event.
Yeah.
Right.
That's unique
the
to
problem
this book.
with Necron dates. It's like it doesn't matter because this is gonna take such a long time frame anyway that.
Yeah, and then, like, there's other ones, though, like Eric's talking about, where I am pretty sure that Kraken Teeth was the 30k sword that Lehman Russ used, and he clearly calls out a sword that has giant teeth of a kraken down it that he picked up from whatever battle he was talking about at the time in the Heresy, and he couldn't place it because the sword itself is much older and appears to be some other relic from a different society.
Yeah.
But then he stabs Orikan with it, and I didn't care what it was anymore. Now it's just funny.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, if you didn't know what the sword was, you weren't going to get why this scene worked.
Yeah. It picks up relics, stabs man.
Yeah, he's like, he grabbed a magic sword. He stabbed a ghost. You're like, hey, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I do like that, like, throughout the entire book, there's additional call-outs that if you know about it, it's really cool. But if you don't, it does a job just fine.
Yeah, I don't feel like if you didn't know what this was, we're going to sit with it long enough that it's awkward that you didn't know what this was. But also, like, I'm not going to spend 40 pages explaining this.
Right.
Like, if you know what this is, you're going to go, hey, that's cool, and then move on with the story. And if you don't know what that is, you're going to go, I don't know what that is, and then we're going to move on with the story. It doesn't detract anything, but if you get it, then it's cool. But if you don't, you're not going to be like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
I was going to say, actually, from someone who has a lot more lore experience, I took notes of, like, all the things that get called out that are from external things that are like wink winks. There's very few. Like, we've named them all, essentially. It's like those, the Catachan jungle monsters, and then just, naming different factions when he's summoning them to battle.
Okay.
But those are like core level. He summons a data smith and a bunch of robots for AdMech. You see those. Those are part of 40k.
Right. That's true. That is true.
A homunculus and pain engines. Some would say we did that last episode.
Wow.
Chronosense activated. Going back in time.
So you got a couple notes. Do you remember what was being said when Orikan was constantly going back during the Necron Court? Like the Groundhog Day.
It was a Groundhog Day.
I didn't keep track of all the members of the court because I knew by this point that it didn't matter. So, I didn't bother. It is a scene where your first read through, what you're supposed to pick up from it is some stuff about how Necron law works, and that Orikan is doing something very impressive that is not thought to be possible, and that Trazyn is vaguely aware of what's occurring.
He's so determined to win this debate that every time he makes what is essentially a logical misstep, he's like, nope, running it back. Starting all over, which is hysterical.
And that's a theme throughout. I actually think one of the most horrifying parts of the book is right at the end when Trazyn's at the gate and Orikan shows up pleading with him not to open it.
Mm-hmm.
And Orikan and Trazyn's like, it took you 300 years to dig yourself out of the ground. You look like a mess. And Orikan's like, no, 2,122 years of digging into rock. Every time I dug into something hard, I had to rewind time back to the start and try a different route.
At the foot of the stairway was a wretched creature, gaunt and skeletal, battered and encrusted with minerals until its body was the colour of a necrotic limb. Exposed wires in the fractured death mask buzzed with electrical glow. Its fingers, if one could call such worn and stubby things fingers, had been scraped to nubs that leaked hydraulic fluid. The spine twisted sideways in an S-curve, so it could only support itself by leaning on a staff capped with a starburst pattern. Orikan? Do not... The creature paused, trying to find words or breath. Open the tomb. Do not do it. Trazyn laughed, a booming sound that became lost in the high vaults. Ha! Playing at your old tricks, Orikan? I think we are far past that. Look at yourself. Look at your fingers. Dug yourself out, did you? Orikan hobbled up another step, then another. Do not open it. You do not want what is inside. Took you 3 centuries to dig out, I suppose? 2 millennia, said Orikan. He levered himself upward, still far from Trazyn. 2,122 years needed to escape, to make it here. Each time I dug for soft rock, when I became blocked, I traveled back, retraced steps. Do not... Trazyn cackled.
That is a fucking horrifying existence. 2,122 years of digging at dirt.
Yeah.
And like the soul-crushing thing of like hundreds of years of doing it only to have to rewind time.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. That is one of the scenes, though, like, immediately after that kind of, you know, like, you're like, what the hell, Trazyn, kind of thing.
I think that's great if we want to talk about the climax.
That was like a weird shift all of a sudden. You're like, something is not right here because this dude is not...
Yeah, I love that because it's foreshadowed well on like a reread of Trazyn is constantly the one listening to the music of the world, paying attention to everything, and Orikan's the one shunning it all other than Vashani. And Vashani is clearly attempting to fuck with Orikan and like is clearly a malevolent force, but Orikan discovers it and figures it out. And that's like what is revealed at this twist scene, except Trazyn has been enchanted by the subconscious drawing signal that's underlaid under the normal Song of Serenade, the Deceiver put there. And this is the reveal of like, you thought it was going to be him trying to stop crazy Orikan at the end. And it's like, no, Orikan has to stop Trazyn because he's the one who's been taken over by the song and is currently enchanted.
Yeah, and one of the weird aspects of that is like how much Orikan is basically a simp for Vashani.
Oh man.
Oh man, so bad.
Oh my god.
It's
like
so awkward.
The sex scene.
Yeah.
I've never done this before. You have to open yourself up to me to become one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could get a virus. I don't know. I heard about that in PE class.
Like Orikan has ever been to PE class.
Okay, that's also something that on my second read, I enjoyed. Just absurd amount of Orikan and Trazyn are old fuckers. They were old when they got pitched into the forge.
They were old for Necrons, which is something to always remember. Of like, Necrons die by 50 no matter what.
If they're lucky.
Yeah.
But then you go and you see like they're, you know, throwing people through walls and like punching dinosaurs. And it's like these 2 old guys that are fighting in a museum, throwing shit on the ground, throwing pottery on the ground, can also like punch dinosaurs. This is such a weird dichotomy.
One of the fight scenes, they talk about how, like, in the flesh time, this would have been embarrassing. 2 old scribes going at each other.
Yeah.
It would have looked comical to outsiders, but both of them have the strength of, you know, machines now.
They're like super scrawny, I've only ever read a book kind of people. What's outside, what's grass? And they're like just going at it. And it's like, if they were flesh, this would be much more of like a hysterical slap fight. But because they're machines, they're like, hey, but what if we just blow apart an entire wing of a building?
So I guess in the action scene thing, to move us around yet again, how'd you feel about the second act with them on the planet working together leading up to the orc invasion part and that huge action piece?
I think it made sense. I mean, I enjoy watching them just kind of like have to suffer hanging out with each other because they like hate each other, but like they reach a point where they don't. Neither one of them would ever say, oh, we're friends.
But they both have some amount of respect.
Yeah, they've also reached that stage where it's like, but we're gonna hang out and sit in a cafe and watch people do things. I mean, I can understand why, Orikan is like, hey, the orcs are coming and I need your help because I can't wake up enough people on my own to do this without triggering all of the alarms. People are going to ask a whole lot of questions about that. But if you do some and I do some, then it'll be fine.
It's one of those where it's like they both know that they're going to betray each other.
Yeah,
but
like the
they each think like, oh, I'll be able to get a one-up on you.
They both think, okay, the other one's going to betray me, but I'll betray him better.
Yeah, they'll never see it coming. And it's like, okay, but you guys have been doing this for like centuries now.
Yeah.
You would think you would understand that.
Nope. And it's great that they don't.
No, it really does add to the story that they're both constantly like planning for each other's betrayal and then trying to decide how they can betray that. Like, it's just, he's going to betray me, and so instead I'm going to do, and it's like, you both know you're going to do this.
And it's one of those that like after it happens, they're like so...
How dare you?
Yeah, I can't believe you've done that. And it's like, you know that they were going to do it. You can't believe that they beat you on it.
Yes.
It's not about that it happened. It's that they did it better than you did, kind of thing.
Yes.
What did you think of the actual orc invasion scenes? Like that big action sequence in space and on the... I have opinion. It's a leading question.
This is a leading question. Objection.
I don't hate it. I thought it was interesting. Orcs are just such an odd race to begin with that it's just odd. They're
good fun.
Yeah, they're just constantly excited to fight anything at all. If it moves, they're gonna fight it. Like,
I will highly recommend the Ghazghkull Thraka book, Prophet of the Wa, if anyone is actually interested in orcs after this book, because orcs are amazing. That book is so well written for that.
The audio version.
Yeah, it's multiple people for different chapters. It's incredibly well done.
So, like, here in Infinite Divine,
this action scene takes too long.
This is a story about Necrons and stuff and them going back and forth.
This is a story about the planet. I accept the orc invasion being a key part of it and orcs having some limelight. I like that. The orcs in this have good scenes. My problem is this scene drags, especially on rereads.
I did not find that at all.
It is such a long scene. I think the problem is you have the entire space battle followed by on the ground, then back to space, then the water portion, then the underwater portion with the Necron fight.
Yeah.
And it is like start to finish in the audiobook. This is like an hour-and-a-half long action scene. And there's good moments throughout it. The Trazyn revealing that, like, oh yeah, I could have killed a Gargan in like one shot with a single Doom Scythe, but I'd rather waste all of these resources and keep it. The little things like that are fun in it, but oh my god, it's so long.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. Jenny, this was your first time. You don't have the...
This is why I'm interested in her opinion on it from a first time, because on my third read, it was a slog. But I can't remember on my first read how I felt about it.
I mean, it is... Like, when you put all of it together, it is a long sequence of events, but I don't feel like they're boring events. And it makes sense that, like, the box says you've got, like, 2 days, and the orcs are here, and, like, you've got to do all of this stuff back to back. There's no...
The ticking time bomb element is good.
Yeah, so I get why there's so much happening, because they got to fight in space, they got to fight on land. Then you have to get Orikan to the land, because, obviously the whole point is he's not just going to stay in space the whole time. So you got to give him a reason to do that. And
I think the reason I enjoy it is exactly what you brought up of there's a time, and that's such a thing that doesn't matter to Necrons, that like, no, you can't put together this intricate fucking century long whatever. You can't just let the enemy die out just because they lived long enough.
Yes,
this is a time frame. All of the things have to happen.
Enforcing a ticking clock element on someone who would solve most problems with waiting.
Yeah.
I will say that because we were doing the audiobook and I didn't have the audiobook timeline in front of me, I had no idea how much longer was left in the book.
And I think that's, on the first read through, it may not bother you at all. I think my problem is knowing the action scene already makes it much more of a slog of, oh god, there is so much left in this action scene still, and we're only at the halfway point of the book. I know this is a pseudo dead end point. Like, this is the thing that goes wrong.
See, and I didn't know that we were halfway into the book. I had no idea how much longer was left. And so the end of that scene where the door closes and nobody gets anything at all was just kind of like, what?
Because it really was a battle to build it up.
If we had stopped and been like, hey, do you think this is the final battle? I probably would have been like, yeah, I could see it, like the longer it goes on. And then for nobody to get anything at all and it to not be the final battle was just like, what? That's hysterical. That nobody gets anything at all. And like, again, because they're Necrons, when the box is like, oh, it'll be another 100,000 years, it's like, whatever, that's just an inconvenience. But like, just for them to get so close, like literally like to touch the open door frame and then nobody gets anything at all is just, it's kind of amazing.
So on a similar vein, thoughts on the final battle sequence?
I really enjoyed that because the whole time they're fighting, they're both very clear, like, I am not trained for this. This is not my thing. I have no idea what I'm doing. We're just kind of winging it, and they're fighting like a literal god. And it's like, I am not ready for this at all, but here we are, so...
Like, all of the tricks that I know aren't really gonna work on this thing. Gonna try them anyways, but
yeah, because neither one of them is like a general or a battle trained. Like, they had people for that, and those people are not here, and they're like, this is not what I do. I don't enjoy this. We're gonna try because I don't have a choice.
So on my second read, I enjoyed the orc battle sequence. I did skip around on the final one, though.
I'm actually the opposite. That's where I think it comes down to taste in the battle.
I think it does.
When you don't know the end, I don't think I had a problem with the orc battle the first time through. I can't remember that long ago. But the final battle, I still, like Jen did, I still enjoyed my third reread of it because it's such a great finish for showing off Orikan's skill as like a tactician and being able to do time manipulation and having to stretch his ability to control things, his issues with micromanaging. All of that is shown off there. Great character stuff. Trazyn has less to do, in my opinion, other than the fun Pokeball moments. And I hope you brought an army. You think so little of me, my dear colleague. I brought 5, which is just the greatest fucking Trazyn line in this book.
Like I said, I still enjoyed it, but it was also easier because on my second read, I actually read it. The first time was on audio. The second, I used words and eyes and did that thing. So it was easier for me to kind of like do the skimming of like, I know this part and I know the end result and like I'll just gloss by it quicker. So like I it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I just kind of passed through that section a bit faster. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely great parts like the Pokeballs, but also Trazyn showing up with 10 clones. Thought I might need one, so I brought 10.
Yeah, the pre-programmed Lich Guard that already looked like him, so it doesn't take time to transfer.
Right.
And the fact that Orikan is like, wow, I've definitely had this nightmare before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just like all of these Trazyns coming out of a hole. Nope, we're good, thanks.
Yeah. So, like, I did enjoy it. I wasn't sure if... I think, yeah, maybe it is one of those, the first time through, if you don't know, like, the time frames of, like, how much is left and all that stuff, you can enjoy both of them. On the second time through, maybe it's, like... Because they are different fight sequence themes.
Yes, that is very true.
Although, I do have to appreciate the aftermath of the orc fight scene.
Yes, that's what I was just going to transition us into. I'm so glad you did it. It's
because there are technically humans on the planet when the orcs invade, and the orcs make it to the planet's surface, so Trazyn is responsible for dealing with the orcs on the planet's surface. So he does so... And the humans see him do this because, Trazyn's like, I don't care. What are they going to do to me? Nothing.
These are like kind of backwater area human type thing. They don't have like Astartes.
Basically, no human in the Imperium will ever see an Astartes in their life is a key thing. It doesn't matter where you live. Unless you are on like literally a planet where a chapter is located, you will go your entire lifetime only hearing about the Emperor's angels and never seeing one.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like a village, it's not like it's a planet like Holy Terra where it's like there's literally only buildings everywhere. There's no land left, So it's just like a nothing village fantasy town. And so Trazyn saves them from the orcs, and they're like, the giant metal man saved us. He must have been a space marine, because that's what space marines are, giant metal men.
So you get the Silver Skulls chapter.
So then they build a statue of Trazyn in the center of their town.
It makes sense. Like, it really does. Like,
Oh yeah, no, the giant metal man came from the sky and saved us from the orcs.
sounds like a space marine.
Yeah. And then on the stained glass window, it's Trazyn is a hooded librarian with the skull motif, and he has all the silver skulls behind him, and they're saving the people from the orcs. It's so fucking good.
And then the Inquisition is like, no, you can't have this. So Trazyn just takes the statue. He's like, it's my statue. I'm putting it in my house. What are you going to do about it?
Did you have a statue of yourself, Orikan?
Right.
I only wonder if any cultures worship you as a living saint, which is like the greatest fucking brag.
And very much like, he doesn't really care that much other than being able to say that.
Yes. The brag is why he cares, not the saving the humans. The fact that he accidentally made people worship him, and he is so high on it. And then Orikan is a complete dick when he's being petty after the Gene Stealer attack.
Yeah. I do enjoy the, like, some time passed after that and some stuff happened, and they go back to the library area and his window, and there's some vandals breaking it. and Orikan's just like, oh, look. Trazyn's like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, because that's right after Trazyn lays the Gene Stealer timer to fuck with Orikan. And then Orikan comes and visits him and confronts him, slams down the Gene Stealer claw.
Throws the arm at him. He's like, what are you doing?
And then they go back out from his library under the stained glass cathedral, and as they go out, he realized that someone vandalized and broke his stained glass window, and Orikan's like, they probably thought it looked ugly.
Yeah.
It's not shown, but you know that Orikan did what Trazyn did, where he like calculates and like relives throwing that rock 1,000 times before throwing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he played that in like ultra slow motion so he could savor every moment.
His chronosense was dialed all the way back.
All the way back.
And those types of things just constantly kept happening, and that's why like it kept feeling a spy versus spy comic over and over again, and I just loved that.
I love the payoffs of it during the coup.
You got us a box seat for a coup.
Right. And the whole fact that it happened when it did because, like, the Imperium ships warped in, like, 100 years early or whatever.
And Trazyn has been denying doing the Gene Stealer prank on Orikan until they're running away, and Orikan's like, is that the one you threw at me? And he's like, at the time, I didn't know they were disease vectors. He's like, right. So you did try to kill me. I didn't say that. If I wanted you dead, I would have used more than one.
Yeah, I have a bunch of them. And it's just like,
which then has the payoff in the final fight of opening up the one that has like 100 of them.
Yeah.
That gets into like the whole Exterminatus sequence in general. Like, Jen, on your first read through, I guess, how did you feel about like that section of the book with like the lead up of like finding out the planet is going to get destroyed by the Imperium and like the payoff of what occurred?
So like, yeah, they have the, I guess it's not the Awakened Council at that moment.
Yeah, it's the Triarch Praetorians have taken over, which is a whole thing I'm not going to bother explaining to you, but the police take over.
Yes, but so the police have taken over, and they're like, you guys have to do this, but also the planet is scheduled to be destroyed that same day, so you guys are really going to have to figure this out, like, pretty quickly. But they never say why, and you just kind of assume, like, well, that's just...
Yeah, it's just Imperium
that's just how it works. Yeah, the Imperium just do that, you know? Like, you say something wrong and your whole planet gets destroyed because that's just how the Imperium works. So then you have, like, a really long time frame in between where they end up doing a whole bunch of random other stuff. So, like, you know that the planet is scheduled to be destroyed, but they don't really kind of cover it. Like, they drop a couple of hints, but it really just seems more like... I don't want to... Like, yeah, it just seems more like, yeah, like, the humans say stuff, but it sounds more like just, like, humans telling fairy tales and not, like...
And also, like, oh, this is just giving us a vague timeline reference.
Yeah,
like, okay,
yeah.
Fine.
And so then they're at the theater and it all starts going down, and it's like, this is the result of Trazyn deciding to fuck with Orikan. Like, this you are causing the problem that made it so you two had to work together to solve this before the planet gets destroyed, but you are the reason the planet is getting destroyed because you two had to work together. It's
right.
It's just hysterical.
The problem occurs of, we know it will get Exterminatus. You two are forced to work together. Because they're forced to work together, Trazyn plants the Gene Stealer to fuck with Orikan because they're being petty.
Yeah, they're just... that's
Which
just what
causes
they
the
do.
Exterminatus.
I do enjoy that aspect of like future sight type thing, but we don't fully plan out all of like, these are all of the reasons that it became what it is.
Yeah, it's the imperfect look at the future, and like Orikan can see multiple futures, and Trazyn can with the cloak too, of like
Right.
picking a future
Yeah.
where you don't get your head caved in.
So yeah, I mean, like if Orikan had killed the first Gene Stealer, there wouldn't have been any left to start the whole problem, but he didn't. But if Trazyn wouldn't have released the Gene Stealer in the first place,
Yeah.
it's just a prank, bro. Destroys an entire planet.
That he was very upset at the idea of being destroyed, which is the key aspect of this, is the tragedy of he is the only one who cares about these random people. He enjoys them. And he's the one who causes their destruction because he couldn't help himself from pulling a prank.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, earlier you had said, like, oh, he doesn't destroy. And I was like, well, he does. He absolutely does destroy an entire planet. Not on purpose, though. I'll give you that.
I guess talking about, this is one more for me, I guess. I don't know if you guys even like care enough about 40k lore for this aspect. Necrons and spells. Do you have any opinions on how the Necron quote-unquote magic happens?
It seemed fine. Yeah, it wasn't fully explained enough because it was always from the perspective of Trazyn, who just doesn't give a shit, or Orikan, who's so deep into it that you have no frame of reference. Also, it was just kind of like, okay, this is their wizarding wand, and that lets them do the thing.
Did you have any feelings about it, Jen, when you read it?
I think Eric is kind of right. Like, it's, you get it from one of two points of view, and one of them doesn't care because he can't do it, and one of them is like a super wizard, so he's not going to explain it, you know, like he just does it.
So this is a viewpoint of someone who cares about Necron lore
All right, then.
and how the warp and normal space interact in 40k. I think it's wonderfully handled and is an amazing way to show off an aspect of Necrons. Something the Necrons are often described as is the masters of the materium, which means the species that is most mastered the real universe. They can't deal with the warp. They vaguely understand it. It is outside of them. They are a psychically dead race. They're trainers, the Catan, were gods of the material world. They are not warp gods like all the other ones. They are this universe's gods, and gods in air quotes still because of like, not a spiritual god, but like an all-powerful being type thing.
Right.
But for everyone else, they draw upon the Imperium and have to like use warp magic to do things. But to the Necrons, they just cast spells. They put their hands in a certain position, channel energy in a certain way of the universe, and can cause things to occur like time changing or antimatter jetting out of their hand or a fundamental force of the universe hitting someone. Things that are within the scope of the real, but to us appear to be magic and are essentially magic, but it is science to them. It is...
Right.
To them, it is, this is how you control the universe. This is the laws of the universe. You just don't understand them yet.
Yeah.
And it gets into the whole, the famous, the sci-fi quote.
Anything sufficiently advanced is essentially magic.
Exactly. Which I love that idea for Necrons of, we have the Psychomancers, the Plasmancers, any form of Cryptek, and they all have magic in air quotes, but it doesn't work like psychic powers do. It is literally just technology so far beyond anyone else's understanding that it appears to be magic.
I see what you're saying. I don't think this book had enough. You saying that and thinking about it in retrospect, I can see a lot of those points coming up, and it like you point to it and it's like, oh, I understand what you're saying, but like in the book itself on its own, you kind of get glimpses of it, of like, yeah, there's, especially from Orikan, where like he goes through like permutations of mathematical formulas and geometric representations, and it's like, that's not how like warp magic would generally work.
Exactly. He uses the real instead of the unreal to do things. That it's something that I was wondering if it comes across or not without the external information. I didn't think it would. I was just wondering.
No, not enough to really pinpoint, but enough to be like, yeah, okay, it kind of makes sense. There was also some of the like magic stuff from the Eldari, the Farseer.
Yes.
And that also wasn't really explained in any way. So like, I think the focus of this book wasn't really on like the specifics of how.
I would agree that this book comes across much more as like, this universe has magic and now we're moving on.
Yeah.
It doesn't really get into the like specifics of who's doing magic, how, and why. Personally, I don't feel like it would really fit here. I feel like you would spend a lot of time talking about like your magic system in a buddy cop movie.
Right.
It's like I don't really want to spend the first 20 minutes of my buddy cop movie having one of them explain how a gun works. I just need to know that they have it and that we're going to use it and we're moving on. Because they didn't really explain like a lot of the stuff. Like they have a lot of artifacts, they have a lot of capes and headdresses, and like each one does something, and they don't really get into why. It just does, and we're moving on. And I don't personally need an in-depth description of the history of the obliterator.
Right.
He has an obliterator. It obliterates.
I actually appreciate that Trazyn doesn't even know where he got his obliterator. He's like, I don't know who made this, but it's really good at caving in Catan skulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we don't cover, like they have a lot of gadgets they use. We don't cover the history. We don't cover why it works, how it works. You know that there's some kind of cool, probably a history behind it, probably some kind of crazy universal power behind it. Orikan puts his hands in cool signs, magic comes out. Good enough.
Yeah. For this book, because like you said, this is kind of like buddy cop, the adventure or whatever, it wouldn't really fit to go in depth and putting together the magical systems that...
Yeah. And
like,
that's fair.
Because like there are some books that do that fantastically. That like here's the underlying systems, the foundation of this world's and universe's magic.
Brandon Sanderson, the main draw to anything he makes is his world building and spell systems, and then popcorn writing.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the magic system doesn't really need to be done. Like it can be done. Brandon Sanderson does a great job of building that up. But that like the whole book there is kind of like building that section up. If you can't devote the book layout to it, it kind of feels like it becomes like a fan fiction kind of thing. At least some of the other 40K books get this like, I'm going to explain something really fucking cool. And it's like, yeah, I was a teenager once too.
I remember when I would have thought that was the raddest thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that this didn't go into that type of thing. And it just kind of gave hints here and there that like if you know about it, like you explaining it, I see the hints, I understand it, but didn't need to be any more than it was.
Yeah, that's not really like a point of this book.
All right, I guess as one last thing, what is everyone's favorite scene of the book?
Okay, I'll go first. My favorite scene is with the scribe, and I think that's probably a lot of people's favorites.
It's my favorite too.
It just does such a fantastic job of showing the lack of time frame from a Necron, but also showing like the lack of not care, but like
awareness.
Yeah, awareness. Because Trazyn like is like, yeah, I made your life better. I helped you get your family stable jobs and education, and you've got, you know, you've been doing great and all that stuff. And the scribe knows that he's got the brain parasite, and you can basically get the understanding that like he's like, yeah, it's still better to have that and live the life that I'm living than to not have it and go back to what the Imperium does to normal people.
Yes, the mind shackle scarabs.
Yeah, so it really is one of those like difference in expectations between like a normal human and a Necron is just so put into a reality that you could understand with the scene of the scribe. And it does end really well. Yeah, it was the most painful thing ever, but at least it was quick.
I enjoyed the sense that like Trazyn doesn't see the time like other people do. Where he's like, didn't I just pay to get your knee replaced last week? And the scribe's like, that was like 10 years ago. And he's like, oh, well, all right then.
I guess it has been a little while.
He's like, oh, I guess, yeah. Like he just doesn't even notice that it's been like years. And
yeah, and like doesn't pay attention to this old guy is when it's brought up. He's like, oh yeah, you look like you're about to die.
he actually like puts the book down and he's like, oh yeah, I guess I just actually haven't looked at you in the last 20 years. Dang, dude.
Oh, what happened? That's wild. Yeah, I really do like that scene. I mean, there's a bunch of one-liners that are just amazing.
I have grown old in your service, and it is not a question of willingness. Younger men in the librarium wish to move up, and they cannot while I hold my post.
I also enjoy the like duality between Trazyn saying, go sit at your desk because he doesn't want to have to carry a body up the stairs.
Yes.
For me, I think I'm going to go with that final scene at the end where like Trazyn and Orikan have like had this ride and like they've hated each other and they've tried to kill each other and now they've had to fight a star god together, and like Orikan has come down from his high and Trazyn is like actually concerned, truly concerned, like
right.
I really hope that this didn't kill you. I hope that you're not like dying. Are you gonna be okay? Can I get you out of here? He's not like, Orikan's like, don't touch me, and Trazyn is actually like trying to respect his personal space, and like, you and I don't really like each other, and we'll probably be trying to kill each other next week, but at this moment, I really do hope that you're okay.
Orikan, have you suffered damage? There was no answer. My dear Orikan. Trazyn knelt and put a hand on his quaking shoulder plate. Don't touch me! The diviner wailed, trying to shrink back into the masonry. Don't touch me! Don't touch me! It's all right, friend, it's all right. Trazyn held up his palms to show he was no threat.
I also enjoy the reveal of, like, even in that moment with all that honest care, he was still stabbing him in the back by taking the 6th shard. These two will never change their opinions on each other. They will always hate each other.
They are so opposite and so much like they hate each other, but there's a respect that like they're both good at what they do, that they kind of care for each other at a certain aspect. Like, if you didn't exist,
Who else would I hate? What would I spend all my time on?
the Batman and Joker. I was really happy to see the epilogue.
Yes, I remember after your first read and we were discussing this in the car, and that was one that you specifically mentioned of you were so glad they don't become friends and that everything goes back to status quo if they didn't learn a lesson.
I love that the ending had that honest emotional care after all of the shit that they've been through.
But they're still shitbags.
But I still am so glad that there was the epilogue of these are undying, immortal shitbags that'll never fucking change.
Yes.
I do think part of it is like, how dare anyone but me kill you?
Right.
Like, I'm not going to let you kill him because I'm going to kill him because who are you to kill him? You just showed up 5 minutes ago. I've hated him for years.
Yeah. I've hated him since before the transference.
Which, okay, minor aside, this actually bothers me, but it has an explanation within the book. Their memories make no sense before transference, and they should realize it, but obviously because their minds have been altered by the Deceiver, they aren't aware of it.
Right.
Trazyn is, and was, even as a Necrontyr, an overlord of the Nihilic dynasty, who ruled over planets, all their own in their own sector of space. Orikan is from the Sautek dynasty, and is the high mage, whatever his official title is, of the Sautek. Trazyn would never be the one to drag Orikan to the furnace, and they should have been aware that it was something fucking with their heads, because it would have been a Sautek person.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it just kind of like I think it makes it more obvious on retrospect of like, clearly the memories from before are not real. That's not something that you should bank on. I understand that you hold on to it because that's all you have.
Okay, but enough distraction. For my favorite scene, Eric stole it. So instead I'll go with my second favorite, which is the opening scene. And if you take any lesson from the infinite and the divine, with everything we've discussed about, the lesson is, Exodites need to exist in 40k, I want my goddamn laser dinosaurs.
I mean, it fits well enough with anything else, but I thought you were going to go into something of, like, it kind of, like, ends on this is a wheel, and the wheel turns ever on, and...
No, I don't give a fuck about Wheel of Time. No one cares.
Like, oh, we'll bring it back to the original Eldari interaction at the start of the book where it talks about the... And I was like, oh, no, he doesn't actually care about any of that. He just wants fucking dinosaurs.
I thought he was going to go with never change, always stay toxic.
That's my motto, not the book's motto.
But no, yeah, the second one would be give me dinosaurs. I can see that.
All right, and on that note, we're done with the discussion. However, stick around for a second. This discussion was brought to you by our lovely patrons who decided on this episode for the season. Our patrons keep us running, and without them, you wouldn't get any of this. So normally we do a once-a-month shout-out that we say over the end credits of the audio version, but we're doing it right now.
Because this is a patron-decided episode, and these ones have helped out quite a bit.
They are Danik Tomyan,
Jaden,
Jeff Stumpo,
Rhett,
Gyarados,
Cameron R,
Cool Kicks Canner Johnson,
Grundle Bundle,
Squirson,
Fizzled,
Dr. Lace,
and Andrew Pope.
Thank you all.
Yeah, definitely thank you for supporting the show. Hopefully you enjoyed the end decision for this episode.
And in addition, we have our lovely producers who pay us way too much money to keep us going. They are Daniel McKinnon, Robert Teleno, Jan Geisy, and Michael Sullivan. Thank you all.
Thanks for keeping my husband occupied.
So he doesn't continually fill your head with 40k knowledge that you don't care about.
Well, I mean, that still happens. But
Clearly.
at least now he has somewhere to direct it.
All right, on that loving note, I think that does it for us this week. Please make sure to do the YouTube niceties if you're on YouTube. Special thanks again to all of our patrons, not just those we shouted out. And feel free to join us in the YouTube comments and tell us what you thought about the book, because I want this to feel more like a book club and not like a lecture. I honestly would like to see other people's opinions on the book, so don't be shy. We actually want to read these comments.
Remember to tell Brad that he has no taste and that the orc battle scene was awesome. But yeah, definitely let us know. It was fun. It was a great read, and love to see what other people have to say on it. And I mean, we're definitely going to do another one at some point.
And let's get out of here for the week.
Sounds good.